Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Scott Luton, Greg White here with you on Supply Chain Now. Welcome to today's live stream. Gregory, how are we doing?
I am doing quite well. How are you doing?
I am doing wonderful. We have a big show teed up here today. Someone was just trying to ring me right before we went live there. I didn't have my
You know,
ringer off. Hey,
it's
that's
funny how
dangerous.
often that happens, right? It's like 11:30 right as we start prep, and then at
Right?
noon, somebody calls you, and is it always a spam warning? It seems like mine's always a spam warning.
Oh, tire, car warranties, you name it. But hey, all of that aside, Greg, on today's show, big show teed up. We're continuing a very popular limited run featured series entitled Decoding Digital Transformation, sponsored by our friends at Next World. And folks, you can learn more about Next World at nextworld.net. Now, Greg, today's show
Hmm.
is the second of three installments. We're going to be diving in on the critical question, what's next? All
Yeah,
with a big time guest and Greg Davis with Grant Thornton. Are you excited, Greg?
I am for a lot of reasons. You know, one of them. Should I announce it?
Sure, please.
Greg is from Kansas City and a big Chiefs fan himself, so we won't spend the whole show talking about that, folks. I promise. But always good to have a member of the kingdom present.
And there's a kind of a big deal going on in Kansas City tonight with the NFL
Heard
draft,
that.
right?
Yeah. I think what we should ask Greg. I think he's going to be there.
Well, we're gonna talk that. We're gonna talk golf. We're gonna talk all
Yeah.
about what's next when it comes to digital transformation. So, folks, get ready. And hey, as I see Barbara and Jim, Jim from North Charlotte, Barbara from Nashville, Tennessee, Robbie from Tampa, Paul from Boston, Inderjeet from Delhi in India. Hey, welcome everybody. We want to hear from you. So let us know what you're thinking as we work through this conversation over the next hour. So, Greg, are we ready to bring on our featured guest here today?
I am ready. These audiences are getting big, aren't
Oh,
they?
man.
Remember when it was just you and me and Amanda?
Yes, I do. As a matter of fact, and you know what? Beyond all the folks that make up our global supply chain family, they're the smartest audience in the business. And I'm reminded every time we have these live events.
Yeah,
So
that's true. Tons of insights.
that's right. So we want to hear it. Y'all keep it coming. So we're going to marry our audience's insights and Greg, of course, your color commentary with what we're going to hear from our featured guest here today. So let me introduce our guest. So Greg Davis brings 26 years of systems and supply chain consulting for big names like Arthur Anderson, PwC, IBM. You may have heard of those. In the last 10 years at Grant Thornton. Now, he's experienced in the evolution of various tools and technologies across the enterprise and across many industries. Greg is a frequent speaker at global conferences. He's a thought leader, author of several publications focused on, we're all after this here, getting ROI out of your enterprise systems. On a personal level, Greg White, get this. Greg Davis is a piano player. He's a big sports fan, the father of four, so he's busy all every day, all day.
Yeah.
And he can beat Lyle Ekdahl in pickleball handily. Greg White, what do you think about that?
Whoa. Talk about throwing down the gauntlet there, right?
So
Next episode,
that's
they'll
right.
be playing, right? I
Live
love it.
pickleball matches. That's right. But
Right.
all of that being said, let's welcome in Greg Davis, principal at Grant Thornton. Hey, Greg, how you doing?
Hey guys,
Open the
how you
door.
doing? Doing great, thank
Good.
you. Pleasure to be with you. Thank you.
Well, great to see you. We've really enjoyed our pre-show conversations. We got a lot to get into here today. And by the way, I see Anja, Mark Nix is with us here today, and Gino, great to see you up in North Alabama. All right, so Greg. We'll start with a fun warm-up question, right? We were talking sports on the front end. Of course, you got the NFL draft there in Kansas City tonight. A lot of football fans ready for that. Folks, if you know who's going to go first in the NFL draft, drop it in the comments. But I want to start with golf, Greg, because Greg Davis, Grant Thornton is a big supporter of golf and a sponsor of the PGA Tour. So both of y'all, and we'll start with Greg Davis. Who is your favorite golfer, and what is one of your favorite tournaments each year?
You Greg or me, Greg?
Greg Davis. Greg
Wow.
Davis, you're our featured leadoff hitter today.
Well, I grew up rooting for Tom Watson, right? So I'm a huge Tom Watson fan, always have been. But these days, with Grant Thornton and like you said, our sponsorship of the tour and moving the game forward, I'm pulling for Ricky Fowler, and I'm pulling for him to get it back, and he's a favorite in our household. So.
Yes.
And my favorite tournament is the Players. I've got the Players Championship is our tournament that we've sponsored over the last several years, and just that's where that's the top lineup in golf. And it's not one of the 4 key majors, but it is. All the pros recognize it as the 5th major.
Everybody says it's the 5th major.
It is, and it's a great place to be and a great tournament to see. So,
love that. And hey, by the way, before I go to you, Greg White, we've got fellow Chiefs fans in the house. John says good morning from Kansas City, home of the NFL Draft and Chiefs Kingdom. All right, I know that gets some smiles from everybody here. Greg White, your favorite golfer and one of your favorite tournaments?
Yeah, my favorite golfer of all time is the late Payne Stewart, because he was really good at getting out of trouble because he was so good at getting into trouble. And it honestly, it encouraged me as a young golfer to see that he could get in so much trouble and get out just like the rest of us. It kind of gives gave you hope. And I would have to say, gosh, such a toss-up. I have a home tournament, of course, in Hilton Head, the RBC Heritage. But also, man, the Tour Championship here in Atlanta, beautiful venue that East Lake is. The danger, the big bucks, and much like the Players, not quite as big, but much like the Players, the great lineup of players that you see there. It's a really fun tournament. It's an easy walk. It's a little bit hilly, like everything in Georgia, but it's a pretty easy walk relative to some of the other courses that are played in hilly territory. Anyway,
love it. All right, we're going to see Greg Davis's and Greg White's golf game live. We'll broadcast that maybe in the weeks ahead. But let's see here. We got
this about 6 months notice, please.
Okay. Sawgrass is a great place.
Sawgrass with that iconic number 17, right?
Yeah.
Now Timothy Scott says he's from Colorado, tired of losing to Kansas City for 8 years. So I'm assuming he might be a Broncos fan. Greg. Is that y'all think?
Yeah.
All right.
I wish I could have empathy.
Well,
Tim's a good guy. He'll get over it.
You're tough.
That's right.
Builds character.
Well, hey, one more little tidbit around golf, because I got to throw this in. Now, this is going to be real cliche, and I'm one of millions, but man, big Tiger Woods fan, and it hurt my heart to see him get hurt in Augusta, and of course he's had surgery after that. I hope he's got one more good run in him despite all that he's been through. I think it's good for the game for sure. Okay, folks, we got a ton to get into here today. So I want to switch gears and get into our Decoding Digital Transformation What's Next theme here today. So I want to start with this. So Greg Davis, as when we introduced you, you folks, he's seen it all, just about, right? Especially when it comes to supply chain, the ongoing evolution of industry, challenges, tools and technologies, you name it. And you've served in a wide variety of industries. So Greg, before we get into the topic, tell us a little more about what your journey, what you've seen.
Yeah, I think you summed it up well. I mean, I've done a lot of systems consulting, around the world for a long time. And, a lot's changed. There's a lot of people out there, and I have a lot of lessons learned too, right? That helped me along the way. But, there's a lot of people that put in systems, right? Try to use systems, try to grow their business. But at the end of the day, the thing I'm passionate about is the ROI that you're getting from all those activities, right? And the reality is that there's a lot of companies out there that just, aren't looking at ROI. They're just they're coming into work, right? Putting out fires, right? Become expediters, if you will, and they're not living the life, right? They're not enjoying their systems. And oftentimes the system becomes viewed as the problem or the constraint, right? And so anyway, what I do is I try to make sure that companies are getting ROI. They're getting a return, right? They're meeting their KPIs. That's what I'm passionate about. So most of the time, like you said, when I'm speaking at conferences or I've wrote a few publications, it's about getting the most out of your systems. It's about ERP governance or the map from ERP to ROI, just because that's what's important. There's got to be a method of the madness. We don't just, as IT professionals and consultants, wake up wanting to implement, upgrade, optimize systems. There's got to be a reason we're doing it.
Right.
So that's my passion, is the ROI side. And I think Lyle, on the first segment of this, he mentioned, that he's a recovering software executive. And I'd say that I'm still an addict. I'm still in the middle of ERP, and I'm heavy in it, and I'm still addicted to it on a daily basis.
So Greg Davis, we're going to dive more into that in just a second, your addiction there. And we're going to talk about the state of the ERP today and a little more there, a lot more to get into. But before we get there, Greg, I got to give you a chance, Greg White, to respond to what Greg just shared there about focusing on the outcomes and the ROI. Your thoughts, Greg White?
Yeah, I mean, that's the key to any technology, right? Or any sort of process or organizational change that you undertake, is to begin with the end in mind. That's a firm belief of mine, and then work back, because working back from that goal will allow you to assess the processes and the technology and the people and their organization that you have in place, and to understand better how you can meet that desired outcome by restructuring or adding or subtracting technologies or process steps and things like that. So as a recovering consultant, that's one of the things they teach you in consulting school, right? Is understand where you want to go, work your way back, understand what indicates a problem in a process, right? And then work on that and find where the root cause of that is. So, I think so many times, and Greg, I'm sure you've experienced this in a couple thousand implementations. I've experienced it a couple thousand times. But that people think that simply plugging in a new technology solves the problem, right? Paradox, where we just think, okay, everything should be fine now. And often it's sold that way.
That's right.
So there's good reason for people to think that way. But the reality of it is you're going to have to go through some conflagrations to change some process, and maybe even give some enlightenment to people to understand the desired outcomes so that they can deliver them.
That's right.
Well said. All right. We're getting off to a fast start. So, folks, as we walk through this conversation, we've got 6 key tips to take away from the conversation. And we're going to share those with you visually. So y'all get your, if you're like me, you like taking lots of notes, 17 pages. We got a lot of good stuff coming. Before we get into the first one, Greg Davis, you got some fans here. You brought your fan club. I think this is Quentin, and Amanda and Catherine, let me know if not. This says, we have used Greg D's roadmap and governance detail in the past. Great framework and positioning for change management. Hey, how about that?
Yeah, thank you. That's awesome.
All right. So let's get into the first topic here today. You've both of y'all kind of already opened up that can of worms. We're going to talk about, Greg Davis, what is your perspective on the state of ERP today, and shed some light on what's next for the enterprise?
Sure. Yeah. ERP, is obviously it's a conversation you don't want to bring up in a bar. It's somebody's always going to get upset one way or the other if you do. But, the reality is a lot's changed in ERP over the last 30, 40 years, but also the reality is a lot hasn't changed, right? In the past 30, 40 years. And that's just the truth. I mean, I think there's a lot of companies that are kind of stuck in more traditional ERP. Lyle mentioned those straitjackets that the traditional ERPs kind of puts in, right? And they don't give you enough flexibility for growth and maneuvering. And there's a little bit of that we see, a lot more these days. And Matthew McConaughey always said, he says, you're revolving, right?
Yes.
And you need to evolve, right? So I think that's true in, corporate America today is, really around the world. It's people are stuck. We just continue to customize, right? To revolve our current ERP situation, and we need to be moving on, right? There's just too much change going on.
Yes.
In the world. So, and when we mentioned some of these, the framework that was mentioned there by one of the friends, I always teach that ERP is enterprise resource planning, right? Nowhere in there does it say system, right? Enterprise resource planning is a way of doing business, right? It's an integrated way of doing business. So, you've got the financials, the distribution, right? Your manufacturing, your HR, all that stuff is coming together, but it's more about the business, right? Leveraging those tools, right? It's not about the system. So, In my world, as in the consulting, as Greg, you mentioned, I hear a lot of the customers come to us and say, we got problems, our systems won't let us do X, won't let us do Y, won't let us do Z. And it's really more, we find that either it's process issues, right? It's data issues, lack of maybe organizational change management. It's not the system's fault, right? Because our theory at Grant Thornton is, essentially all these ERPs, they do the same thing. Mm-hmm. It's the way we manage and run them that ultimately is going to determine our fate, whether it's favorable or unfavorable. So, and that's kind of going back to what Lyle was saying in the last segment, is there's those handcuffs, right, that are there with some of the more traditional ERP solutions that don't allow you to be really nimble, right, that don't provide that flexibility. And as we all know today, if you can't change, you're going to be behind, right, and you're going to be out to your competition. So, we try to encourage people to, again, like Greg's mentioned, begin with the end in mind, focus on that ROI. I'll say that a million times. I apologize in advance. But, if you don't have metrics that matter, so a lot of people come to me and they say, I have ERP issues, right?
Right.
And I say, okay, tell me more. What are your metrics that matter? What are the metrics that matter to you? And the conversation immediately stops. It's more, they're like we said at the onset, right? They're coming into work, they're expediters. They're just, what issues are going to be on my desk when I get in there? Mm-hmm. And that's what they're addressing that day, as opposed to, being more strategic about things. So I try to, make sure they understand, get control, right, of the things that aren't the system first, right? And then, the ERP thing is going to work. So that's kind of the current state, kind of what we see. And I'm sure there's a lot of people on here today that have some of that pain or seeing and experiencing some of that pain. I do think, we talk about evolving. I think there is a need for the ERP 2.0, or kind of what's next, right, where it's going. And a lot of that is the no code push. We see a lot of that now, where companies don't want to customize anymore. I think, consultants like me have made, have got a lot of work out of people customizing their systems, right? Mm-hmm. And looking to someone like me to help get them out of that, and so we've still got RPG, right, developers that are still out there,
right.
And so there's still a lot of the customization, and which is again, thing you don't want to bring up in a bar, add that to the list, but customizations, really keep you from growing in the future. And so I think a lot now, the shift we see is more to platform and capabilities, right, as opposed to code. So, a platform allows you the ability through GUI and configuration to, build your processes out, right, enhance processes quickly, and you don't have to change code.
Right.
So that's a big thing that we're seeing, and you don't have to, build something, then go put it in one environment, test it, go put it in another environment, test it, quarantine, all that. You don't have to do that. You just got to be able to react quickly, especially today. So we always say, hey, platform is capability, right? System is code. So.
All right. So I want to share, Catherine, let's share that first tip there, because Greg touched on it. Greg White, I'm coming to you in just a second. So that first tip, if you're keeping count at home, don't customize unless it is sustainable. Instead, build, extend, and integrate where needed. Thank you for that. All right. So Greg White, man, opening salvo from Greg Davis there. But I want a little interstitial here, I want to bring in Jason Kemp's comment. Greg Davis, the only guy I know that can work in a Matthew McConaughey quote into an ERP discussion. Now, I got to add a little something there, because as Amanda, my dear Amanda here, the better half, she's taught me how to pronounce his name correctly, and it's Matthew McConaughey. Yeah, I think I got that right there, Greg White. But so Matthew McConaughey and ERP, who would have thought? But Greg White, so your thoughts on the opening salvo there from Greg Davis?
Yeah, I think the idea around customization is right on. Look, first of all, we've been able to adapt technology using what I call virtual switches and dials for decades. I worked for a company in the 90s that did no custom code at all and could be used by retailers, wholesalers, manufacturers, people in various industries, hard goods, soft goods, food and beverage, all of those things without any customization. All you do is you just program in those customizations that are repeated constantly. And to Greg's point, he has made a career of undoing a ton of customization. Well, guess what? The nature of the industry is that the software is this much of the expense when it comes to ERP, and the implementation is, I don't have long enough fingers to show you, but I mean, you can spend $10 million on an ERP technology and spend 100 or 200 or 400 million dollars customizing it and implementing it to your organization. And so there is this entire practice in big companies, big consulting and tech implementation companies, where they make hundreds of millions, billions of dollars a year, that has encouraged traditional ERPs to stay with that model. Actually, it's practically forced them to do so, because they don't get the sale if Big Four consulting firm doesn't get a $400 million implementation, right? So the nature of what Greg is talking about is revolutionary. It's revolutionary in that for, a technology that can be adapted with switches and dials and no code applications and things like that. There is no $400 million ticket to implementing it. And we need more of that in industry. And that is being demanded more and more by the generations coming into leadership in companies, right? Gen X, Y, and Z. So I think that's an important thing for people to understand, particularly as we continue this conversation. The other is that whole question around X, Y, and Z. Hey, we need the software to do X, Y, and Z. See, this becomes the client's foundational problem. They want the technology to do what they want it to do. Again, they need it to deliver the outcome they want it to deliver, and that will determine what the technology should do. Right. I think one of the questions, I guarantee you this is a question that Greg Davis asks, and that is, should you even be doing X, Y, and Z? Why don't you tell me what you want X, Y, and Z to add up to, and then let's figure out what the alternatives to X, Y, and Z might be, right? So companies have to come into this world of transformation with an open mind as to what they'll do, but a very clear picture of what they want to achieve.
Clarity is a beautiful thing. Eloquent, both of y'all. Man, we got quite a discussion. We're only not even halfway done. So, Greg Davis, I'm coming to you in just a second, but I want to point out two quick things. We're getting questions around, are we recording this session? Yes. The good news is, folks, you can get this session on demand across our live stream network, across the Supply Chain Now podcast network coming soon. So, hey, you can tune in the whole thing. And then secondly, I think for perspective, Catherine, Amanda, if we could drop the first episode of the series, right, installment number 1 with Lyle Ekdahl, if we could drop that in the chat so folks can listen to the first one and then this one as well. That'd be dynamite. Okay, Greg Davis.
Can I acknowledge one person there, John Donnelly?
Yes.
He knew exactly what company I was talking about, because I believe, John, correct me if I'm wrong, he was at Williams-Sonoma when we implemented there. And John has been in that sort of transformational ERP industry for a long, long time. So not a terribly long time, John. No more than 2 decades.
That's right.
Very knowledgeable.
I've seen a lot of familiar names out there. It's good to see everybody.
Funny how quickly they come back around, isn't it, Greg?
Right.
It is. And hey, Catherine reminded me, find us on YouTube. You can find the previous episode and today's episode, of course. And Jim Brandt, excellent comment here. A problem well-defined is already half solved. It's one of my favorite. Finding that root cause, the real root cause. Okay. So Greg Davis, the plot thickens here. So I got a 3-part question I want to pose to you, right?
Right.
So first off, how do you decode digital transformation in your mind, to your customers, Grant Thornton colleagues? How do you see digital transformation being embraced and evolving over the next few years? And really, what's next for digital transformation, Greg Davis?
Well, I think my answer, you're already going to know. It's ROI, so that to me personally, digital transformation, a lot of people just do things for the sake of doing them. And unfortunately, with digital transformation, everybody's saying that phrase, right? Everybody says digital transformation.
Yeah.
And, it's almost used as a punchline to where, we're modernizing things, we're getting more technically advanced, and it's really not the case. I mean, I think you have to keep your eyes on the prize and be looking at ROI. And so that's the Greg Davis answer. I think the Grant Thornton answer, the things that we're always talking to customers about when they say, hey, what can we do to help our digital transformation efforts move forward? Is we say, okay, there's three, right? Okay, it's operational efficiencies,
Yep.
right? What can we do to improve or address, the operational efficiencies? And can we do that through technology? Can we do that through automation? Those types of things. Second thing is revenue, right? Revenue channels, alternative and new revenue channels. As you guys know, that was kind of part of the problem with, even Greg, you mentioned some people, kudos and round of applause to some of the people that put in ERP using standard functionality only, right? And they did not customize. But then they get to a point in life where business changes, right? Acquisitions happen, disruption happens, right? And then you have to change your business model. And how easily can you do that? And you were in the standard functionality, so you've been given the tools that the software can provide, but now you need to do something different. Then what do you do? And so you get faced with that. So we have to be able to identify, especially, post-pandemic, right? New and alternative revenue models. So again, that'd be the second one. The third one, I think, is, just you have to move your customer and or user experience position forward. So we have to keep your eyes on the customers, and you have to internally keep your eyes on the organization and improve that user experience. And that's huge today, because we have a lot of customers that are using the systems that they've inherited from long ago, right? And so they're just either trying to build better mousetraps or trying to get used to the functionality and things like that. But so the common denominator in those three things is customers, right? And organization, your organization, and so I think a lot of people just think digital transformation is, taking an update, or we're getting current, and things like that. It's not the case. That's not the case, right? You have to be focused on your customers and your organization and moving that forward with technology. And that's digital transformation. So that's the key thing. I think, we hear a lot that, okay, things are going poorly for us with our system. So we're going to we have a huge digital transformation effort going on. And I think what we help them realize is digital transformation, once you know what it is not a silver bullet, right? To fix poor process or poor data. It doesn't do that. And in fact, you have to have a healthy foundation before you can capitalize on any tech, right? And so a lot of times we have to tell people, slow down, slow down. We got to really, Greg, to your point earlier, get back to what's the source of the problem. What are we really trying to fix? And a lot of people don't have the operating model. They don't have the data management, the maturity model, right? They don't have governance. There's a lot of things you have to have before you get there. But to answer your question, Scott, that's kind of the three key things. Focus on the organization, the customers, the revenue model, and then things will work out technically.
Love that. All right. And there's three things again: operational efficiencies, that revenue model, customer and user experience. Love that. And it brings us to the second tip that Greg Davis laid out there. And let's share that visual. Empower your organization and your customers through digital transformation efforts, right? That there's a ton of power in true collaboration. Greg White, I can't wait to hear your comments here on where we're headed.
I think that, the important thing to understand is the organization, both inside and outside your four walls, because nothing is changing faster than that. Right. I mean, we're going through an incredible generational change wherein baby boomers are exiting the workforce at 10,000 a day. An extra 3.1 million of them exited the workforce in 2021. So, and some of those jobs will never come back. And
that's right.
That's and it's an incredible potential loss of tribal knowledge in a company. So the ability to, and the action of actively training and engaging your people so that they understand the why of what they're doing as much as the how-to of what they're doing is really, really critical. Because you don't have books and websites and all kinds of information to refer back to, because most of that was in your parents' head. So when they left, a lot of that knowledge left with them, and a lot of organizations are starting over nearly from scratch on a number of things. So I think the empowerment of the organization, the simplification of interaction with technology. The terminology I've used for 10 years or so is appification. We need to appify even the most complex of technologies. Of course, give the ability to dig deeper, and get more detail if necessary. But if you can just present someone with maybe a recommendation, or maybe simply something to approve outside of bounds where the technology is more prescriptive, right? Meaning it will actually take the action absent action from a human being, and alert you if you're outside kind of normal bounds or whatever. That kind of technology is going to become more and more a part of what we're doing. That's what AI can do for us, is take the knowledge we have as humans and extract emotion, forgetfulness, right? Bias, and
bad days, stress, all that.
Bad days, stress, and just the general intent to please the boss, right? And just do what is right and prescribed for a certain situation.
So I was trying to, Greg Davis, with Greg White's Journey t-shirt he was wearing, I was trying to find a great segue with Don't Stop Believing, but it's just outside of my reach. So we'll keep driving. We'll work it in later.
Get a few more topics.
Gotta have hope.
I believe
Yes.
we'll get to it.
Yeah.
All right, folks, a lot of good stuff there. Appification. I love that phrase. All right, so let's keep driving here. Greg Davis, back with you. I want to talk about how the severity and frequency of recent and current global supply chain disruptions continue to impact your clients and the industries you're working in regularly, and how are they preparing, maybe with you, for what's next in their space? Greg Davis.
Yeah, I think there's obviously more, disruption, change in the supply chain than ever before. I think everybody would acknowledge that. I think a key differentiator for companies today that are doing well is the proactive management of the supply chain, right? They're not just long gone are the days where you can just react quickly, and you have to be proactively monitoring and managing the supply chain. And so what we see, when we're talking to customers today, is really that there's 5 key themes or impacts to that disruption.
Okay.
The one is the rising costs, right, out there to produce and serve the market. The second one being is it hurts everybody, the labor shortage. There is a labor shortage out there that we can all acknowledge, that again impacts the supply chain. The inability of trading partners, to deliver, right? SLA doesn't mean anything anymore. So we have to manage that. The inability of the trading partners, but then the demand for digital solutions is a huge uptick. We see that, supply chain execution. The net of it is it requires, technology, sophistication, automation, right, to make it go. And we see that now more than ever, right? And there was a lot of, I think, companies that were using spreadsheets forever and phone calls, right? And when you have this disruption and this change, that goes out the window. So, and then the fifth thing we see is complexity and risk. Obviously, that's growing on a daily basis. So again, it's the proactive management of those variables. So again, we used to let those 5 things just kind of impact us, and then we had people that were really go-getters and high on the effort scale and could go do it and hope for the best. But you can't do that right now. And we need systems that enable us, right? You have to have the technology and the platforms that can enable you to quickly make changes to your systems. And automation, like Greg said, is a huge part of that. But a lot of our companies like I said, they think the system is the problem, right? And a lot of times it's the operating model, or even if you don't have the operating model defined, it's your target operating model. You got to, we talk with a lot of customers, and they tell us their problems, and then it really comes down to, it's not the system again, it's the operating model, right? And so we always encourage them, let's address that operating model, right? And let's allow that operating model to be able to react, right? So that you're not always, having to blame the system or deal with a system issue. So, and a lot of times people think their supply chain experience is based on what's happening to them. We have to say, you got to have the tools in place and the technology in place, right, to mitigate all that. That we can't be prepared for everything, but you can be prepared for a lot more than you are today, right? And so, that's what we do. That's what we are mostly helping customers understand. A lot of that came from the surveys we did during the pandemic, right? Grant Thornton, we surveyed all of our customer base, audit, tax, and advisory, and wanted to know what they were experiencing year one, year two. Now, what's going on with the supply chain. So we're actively monitoring this and trying to look at it. But those are the big disruptors and the impacts that we're seeing out there today, Greg and Scott.
Okay. So, hey, let's share one of the things, tip number 3 that Greg Davis touched on there. And roulette is a game best played in Vegas, not in supply chains. But one of the things I picked up from Greg Davis, address your supply chain operating model and then advance with digital transformation. So, hey, for the sake of time, I'm going to move right into this next topic here. And folks, in the comments, hey, let us know what you're thinking. What are some of your rules and tips as you navigate your own digital transformation? Greg Davis, let's talk about why it's important to understand organizational change management and other aspects of change, right? We're digesting tons of change. Greg, what you know, I've talked about this endlessly the last few years. Mm-hmm. But also touch on some of those changes associated with what's next in terms of technologies and supply chain management. Greg Davis, your thoughts?
Technology is a key driver of corporate change. And I think that's what companies have to realize if they don't already. I know it seems like it's, that's something we all know and say. You don't need me to come on one of these webcasts and say that. But the reality is we got people out there in the corporate America and IT that don't value the importance of change management. And it's arguably the most important, variable. We've got people in IT working for companies, and they, that don't even know what social media is, so there's a big change that's happened and a shift. And when we talk about change management, to us, it's not just like a newsletter, right? And it's not, a training course. It's not an email, it's not awareness, it's really a lot more than that. It's about, the tools that you have to run your job, right? It's about a job impact analysis. It's about future. It's about continuing education. It's about so much more than that. And Greg, from all the projects, right? I mean, we always, as IT professionals, we always have an issue. We work so hard to get the software ready for the business, right? And in reality, you need a lot more time getting the business ready for the software and the tools. And it just never happens, right? It never works like that. So, there's a lot of people that know change management is an offering, right? They know it's something they need, but it's usually a thing that, frankly, gets left out of the budget or something like that. But I always tell my customers, hey, whether you do it or we do it, somebody's got to do it, right? If nobody's managing the change or providing that organizational change management, then it's probably going to fail, right? Or it'll be a success to IT and a failure to the business, or vice versa, right? So we see a lot of themes. Some of the themes we see out there are, supply chain agility. So, you got to have constant innovation now and change capability, right? So it's not just like, hey, we're going live, and then 5 years later, you're going to have the same user procedure that you did, when we went live. No way. That just doesn't happen anymore, right? So you got to have that agility. And that's a common theme here to all these topics, is how agile, are you as an organization, with your systems? A second one we always see in change management is technology builds trust. So it's something everybody should know if you don't already. I mean, platforms that maximize your capability as a user and give you, the freedom and empower you, those are the higher performing corporations, right? That the user doesn't feel like the system is a limitation. So technology absolutely builds trust, change adoption and acceptance. So you'll have a higher, acceptance of organizational adoption with those tools. If you enable your users in the organization with technology, you're going to have a higher, efficiency. You're going to have a higher user exception, all those things in a culture. So again, you have to focus on change management. And I would tell you that, it's a dynamic world, as you guys know, and a dynamic organization. In this environment, you have to have a dynamic culture. So you have to have people that are used to change, can get comfortable with being uncomfortable, right? And in a dynamic culture. So that's what we're seeing a lot in change management.
Greg White, I'm coming to you next, but Greg Davis, you got to preach that louder for the folks in the back, because there's so much truth there. Being comfortable, being uncomfortable. Let's focus in on that tip 4. A dynamic environment requires a dynamic organizational culture. Talk about a t-shirt-ism. That is certainly one. And Greg White, coming to you next. But speaking of t-shirt-isms, old T-Squared, who holds down the fort for us on YouTube, really appreciated the appification and added that as another t-shirt-ism from our chat here today. But Greg White, talk about managing change and how that factors into the path ahead as well, Greg.
Well, like Greg said, it is culture driven. First of all, you have to be able to embrace change to even think about a digital transformation. And importantly, you have to understand that the change comes preemptively to implementing the technology and rapidly after implementing the technology, because a technology only knows what you tell it vis-a-vis data, right? Or process descriptions or definitions and things like that. And then it ruthlessly and efficiently executes based on what you've told it needs as knowledge and what you tell it needs to do and to accomplish. And that will rapidly expose any slack or weakness or failures that you have in your organization or business process. Another cultural adage, another consulting adage is, as the water recedes, the rocks are exposed. And, working as I did in supply chain, where we would rapidly bring down inventories. If you have processes that require you to have slack, excess inventory, our solution would rapidly expose that. So right. We got to the point where we tried to preempt that and have companies recognize that was going to happen, and then prepare them to make those changes. And then longer term, you have to be, as we talked about, right? Business is dynamic. You have to be aware that there are certain immutable laws of nature in business. And that is, one, you will fall into bad habits and poor practice in your processes, and that will suboptimize the technology. Processes, as Greg said, will change over time because the business changes, the customer mix changes, whatever. And you need to be able to both recognize and adapt to those, either by altering your interaction with the technology or maybe even the technology itself, or by recommitting to good practice in your business. I can tell you that I have seen many companies go, I've been on the beneficial end of this many times. We need new technology. Our technology doesn't work for us anymore. Right? And the truth is, they've fallen into bad practice. And in classic fashion, I helped them get into better practice. And at about the same time, precisely at the same time, that they implemented our technology, which in some cases, very few, very rare, no one would be opportunistic in this situation.
Right.
In some cases, they could have done the very same thing on the technology that they already had and solved their problem. That's God's honest truth from a reformed technology implementation guy, right?
You're keeping it real. I appreciate that, Greg White. All right. So, hey, really quick, we got a ton of great comments. We can't get to all of them. I love Carl Yost keeping Matthew McConaughey with us. All right. Gino's talking about some things he learned the hard way that Greg Davis touched on. Jim's talking about change management is the touchstone to building a sustainable culture. And Barbara, so true here. Oh yes, get comfortable at being uncomfortable. That's should be one of our tips here today.
So I want to address that
Yeah,
particular point.
please.
There are
Yeah.
people who are comfortable being uncomfortable, and there are people who are who have no discomfort with that kind of transition. And I think one thing that organizations need to do is root out, find, and embrace those people and have them be the lead, the cornerstone of their transformation. Because some people, often it's the younger people in your organization, you know who they are. They're kind of generically risk takers, but those are the people that you can put in the forefront who have no fear of this change, and then they can be an example for the rest of the organization going forward. Because the true fact of implementation is you don't force adoption, you don't force buy-in. You demonstrate success, which causes buy-in to happen to a transformation. And those people are great examples. Look for those people in your organization.
Love that. And when you said mercilessly earlier, it reminded me of the who's arch rival of Flash Gordon, because he was something the merciless, I believe. Ming the Merciless. Maybe?
Ming the Merciless. That's right.
Yeah, Ming the Merciless.
I didn't realize that was Flash Gordon. Yeah.
All right. So we got 4 down. We got 2 more to go. Greg Davis and Greg White, both of y'all, man, we've got quite the dynamic duo. Greg Davis, from your perspective, what are other hot topics most important to your clients across all industries as they plan for what's next in their business?
Yeah, I think, customization is always one that comes up. I think we've hit that one pretty hard, and I just go back to, we joke around a little bit. What we say with customizations, it's, hey, the more you do, the less you do, right? Do less is kind of what we tell them, if for those of us seen the movie. But yeah, I mean, it's just, don't do it. Right. I mean, but we can talk about ways to dig out of that hole. But lately it's been more, hey, everybody wants to talk speed to value, right? Everybody wants to talk, especially the C-suite. They want to know, hey, I want value. I need it quick. And we need tools that allow you to do that in days or weeks and not months or years. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So say you got to be able to have a process or a new process, enhance it, right, and be able to implement it and get it in a short amount of time, right? And there's tools that allow you to do that, and there's tools that don't. So we talk a lot about that, and we try to get them more geared towards platforms and things we've already discussed. Automation, Greg White hit it on, hit the nail on the head there. That's the other big thing that we're talking about. And there's really 5 things in the intelligent automation spectrum that we're seeing out there. The first one's the machine learning enhanced character recognition. I think everybody sees and is hearing more and more every day about the value that can bring. I think there's still some things that are maturing in that space, but that would be number 1. System-driven learning, right? Prediction, pattern identification. Those are some other things that we work with organizations. The forward thinkers are looking through that. Greg, it's kind of like what you were talking about. We need things that quickly alert us, right, when we're falling out of line, and we're seeing a lot more of that. Analytics is key. Data, information, knowledge is key. So data analytics and visualization is another thing, that we're talking to customers about. The 4th one is the no code, right? Again, it comes up every day. Enterprise applications, right? And platform focused. There's low code, no code. Rob Fisher, I saw, had a comment about digital transformation being esoteric. Great word. I think the same can be applied to low code, no code, because everybody just throws them out there, and the reality is that low code is still code, right? And it still needs to be addressed, changed, and it's debt associated with all those customizations and programming. So no code is a big one. And then the 5th one is just the RPA, or robotic process automation, and a lot of companies are using those to automate things that potentially have hindered them in the past. So, I think the automation we've hit on, but, there's a lot of companies don't know where to jump in and what to automate. They just know, hey, I need to automate stuff. And you really, we take a hard look at, data, people, processes, technology, as you guys mentioned, and you can find the ideal candidates. I mean, we know, a lot of people just think, hey, I need to automate that. And and you really need to look at the ones, again, not to beat a dead horse, but that give you the ROI. So we always say, don't just automate for the sake of automating, know what you're doing. And I'll leave you with this on the automation thing. It's not just some benefits. There's a ton of benefits to that, right? There's hard and soft dollar benefits to that. The hard dollar benefits are your time savings, your cost savings, your efficiency gains, but really the key thing to me is those soft benefits, right? That you get, you got improved customer satisfaction, right? You got improved internal user organization and change management. I mean, those soft benefits are much larger than the hard when it comes to automation. I think you're growing as an organization with technology, and that's huge.
Yeah, well said. All right, let's throw up tip number 5 before I come get Greg White's quick commentary there. Listen, write this down. Automate where you will receive return on investment. Don't just automate for the sake of automation. Words to live by. Greg White, your quick comment and response there.
Yeah, I think if I had to pick a hot topic, it would be that cloud is now presumed, right? The power of cloud technologies is now presumed. And I'll talk in very basic terms about what the power is. One, it's literally unlimited processing power, right? It's the ability to do, as both Gregs have talked about, to be able to build a technology without custom code, because a technology company is now building one code base and deploying it to all of their customers. Then even if something is arguably a customization for a single customer, it's in a constantly supported code base, because there is only one, right? And then of course the ability to appify and still configure deeply in great measure for every type of company exists, and that constantly moving and yet constantly monitored, sustained, and supported development platform that Greg keeps talking about is ever evolving and yet ever stable and ever supported. So, I think there is now this presumption out there that that's what technology is. People don't even refer to cloud anymore. They just now believe that technology ought to be that way. It ought to be like the apps on your phone, right? It ought to just, if you ask for a feature a week later, a month later, a year later, whatever it takes, it just appears and you don't have to do a thing. So I think there's a lot of, there's a lot of power in that. And I think people have not only recognized the power of cloud, it's almost become the Kleenex of technology, and they just presume it. Right?
Love that. Yeah.
I do. The way things ought to be with Greg White. New series coming to you here. Hey, Greg. And by the way, I think Greg White spoke in dual third person there a minute ago. The Gregs did say this. I love this comment from Harry here. Harry says, do you know what you get when you automate waste?
Yeah,
waste that is automated. Greg Davis, you had a quick comment there?
Sorry. Yeah, Harry's right. I mean, we have a lot of customers that automate bad processes, and
such as
that's Harry's point right there. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. And
all right.
I know Harry, he's made a career of eliminating the waste in those processes. So, he knows of what he speaks for sure.
Harry, great to have you here. All of y'all. I know we can't get all the comments, and we're a little behind time here. So, we're going to bring it all together here. Greg Davis, one of the final questions here. What's next to bring all this together for companies?
Yeah, I think you have to look at your agility, right? As a company, you have to see how agile are we? Let's take inventory, right, and assess where we're at. And you have to look at, how are you still, worried about cover sheets for your TPS reports? Are you, worried about moving forward and advancing, right, and eliminating waste, right, and focusing on efforts that give you the return on investment? So, today we're talking with customers again about your platform, right? Just making sure they have, no matter what system they're on, do you have the capabilities to quickly react, right? And there's some that do it well and some that don't. And some of you out there are stuck with the system that you're on, but you don't have to be. There's ways to make some changes. So you can look to the platform, you can look to no code options, right? Again, going back to what we said earlier, again, no code, definitely better than low code, right? You want to try to avoid that technical debt wherever you can,
Mm-hmm.
and and let your technology grow your business as opposed to hinder it. And then embracing change. You got to related to current and future. You guys mentioned it earlier. The future and current, the current and future talent levels that are out there. That's probably going to be an issue for the next several years, right? As we change and grow through that. And there's a lot of people entering our workspace and a lot of people leaving it. And that so agile organizations, right, empower individuals. So we keep telling people that. So and what does it take to be agile? We have to have the systems that enable you to be agile.
I love that, Greg Davis. Let's drop that up there. Agile organizations empower individuals, and that's how you move mountains and better compete and handle change and succeed, and a lot more. All right, so Greg White, get your final comment on what is next that Greg Davis is talking about, bringing this together for companies and people and leaders.
Yeah, embracing change means building a change culture into the culture of your company. You have to expect, embrace, and even seek out change in an organization that is already operating relatively efficiently. This drives people crazy, but I'm not a if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I'm an if it ain't broke, break it kind of person. And that is more and more the world we live in, because if you don't break it, if you don't redesign it, as somebody said in the comments earlier, if you don't redesign it, you will fall behind and you will be disrupted, upended, outflanked, whatever. Call it whatever you want.
Right.
There is no resting on your laurels anymore. And I think the good news is that the generations that are coming into leadership and into the workforce, they really, really embrace that change. They want to change things. Some of them just for the sake of change, unfortunately, but that can be trained, right? But the spirit of change, the spirit of embracing change is more difficult to train. You really need to try to recruit it.
Yeah, well said, Greg. Times keep it changing, as they should. Greg White and Greg Davis, love this conversation we're having here today. And hey, the gift that keeps on giving. As I think this is Quentin, those TPS reports, Office Space, the movie, the gift that keeps on giving for sure. I like your analogies, Greg Davis. I knew you'd fit right in with us here today. All right. So, hey, heads up to our production team. We're going to keep Greg Davis with Greg and I through today's close, because I got just a couple of final questions. Folks, hey, make sure you check out the first episode with Lyle. You can check out this episode on demand as you dive in deeper some of the things we tackled today. But Greg Davis, really quick, in a nutshell, what do you do at Grant Thornton, and how can folks connect with you?
Well, really, all the things we've talked about today are things we're trying to help customers with. Global advisory practice. These are the things that give us passion, right, and what we wake up wanting to do, and help people in these areas, and be not delay any of the problems, but fix them, right, and help to reinstill that method to the madness and focus on ROI. Make sure you're getting the return on your investment, as opposed to becoming expediters. So.
Yes, I love that, man. Do something about it. And folks, we dropped the link to Greg Davis on LinkedIn. You can check him out there. Or if you're at NFL draft tonight, Greg, right, or folks out there listening and viewing, they might can run into you there as well. Greg Davis, is that right?
Yeah, I'll be there. I hope all your teams pick the right person.
All right. Hey, really quick, Brett Lewis, check this out. It looks like we may have just hit a technology snag there. That happens from time to time. But hey, Greg Davis, Brett Lewis has coined you as the digital transformation whisperer. How about that? That's high praise, huh?
Yeah, I'll take it. I get called a lot worse every day, so I love that. So
well, hey, as opposed to whispering, I hope you keep shouting from the mountaintops, because the message that you and Greg White both delivered here today, leaders, team members, no matter where you are, we need to embrace it. Right. Before we give Greg Davis the closing comment, Greg White, and hey, Murphy's Law is alive and well in global technology. So Greg White, what was your favorite? What was we covered a lot of ground here today. Greg White, what was one of your favorite things that we heard here from Greg Davis?
I think it's so encouraging to hear this notion of sort of a new way to embrace technology, particularly ERP, and to eliminate. This is very simple, but it's so critical to eliminate customization. That is so big. That's a huge aspect of creating a sustainable and continually feasible operating model for companies, is to eliminate that customization. But also, I think the important thing is, look, regardless of the technology, it is all about the culture and the people, right? Technology is going to automate a lot of jobs, and by the way, I believe we're in a space in our in the time space continuum, Scott, for you, the right space nerd, in our space time continuum, where we no longer need to apologize for automation and autonomous doing work, because either those jobs are too expensive, right? The $500,000 a year we pay to actuaries, which will ultimately be completely automated if it hasn't in a lot of cases already, or the jobs that nobody wants, the dark, dirty, dangerous, and dull jobs that we talk about so often, that are better performed and people are staying away from in droves. So this allows us to recruit and to enable a much, much more dynamic organization and create an organization and a culture of change, because they don't have to be worried about, the tightness of that bolt, right?
Yeah,
what's the torque factor on that bolt? Because that can be handled with automation. So it really enables people to use the better parts of their mind and capabilities.
Beautifully said. All right. So Greg Davis, I'm coming to you for the final word in just a second. But babe, before we do, love this discussion today. Thanks for everybody that showed up and dropped the comments. No, we couldn't get to a lot of them. Hey, big thanks again to Next World, our sponsors of this Decoding Digital Transformation. Very popular limited run series here at Supply Chain Now. You can learn more about all the cool things Next World is up to at nextworld.net. And hey, be sure to join us for the third and final installment, where we're bringing Greg Davis back. We're bringing the band back together. Greg Davis, Lyle Ekdahl, everybody coming back for an on-demand or a live webinar. Mark your calendars for July 18th at 12 noon Eastern time. All right, so Greg Davis, if you had to boil it all down to your final word, challenge, closing statements to our global Supply Chain Now fan, what would that be, Greg Davis?
Well, I think I gave you a McConaughey quote earlier, so I probably owe you a better one. And I'll go to one of my favorites, and it's a Martin Luther King quote. One of my all-time favorites is, you don't have to see the whole staircase, you just have to take the first step. So I think a lot of our people that feel stuck, with technology, you don't have to change overnight. There's ways to take that first step, and you can get that ROI. It's not that hard, so there's hope out there, right? You don't have to just keep continuing to deal with this stuff. There's ways you can take that step forward, and there's people out there that can help. So
that's right.
There is hope. Hang in there, take the first step.
Love that. Greg Davis, principal at Grant Thornton. Thanks so much for joining us here today.
Thanks for having me. See you guys.
All right. Big thanks to Greg White. Big thanks to Greg Davis. Thanks to all y'all tuned in. If you missed part of it, hey, it's on demand, coming to a podcast and YouTube near you. But whatever you do, folks, take this excellent advice and insights and expertise from Greg Davis and Greg White and do something with it. Deeds, not words. And beyond it all, Scott Luton, as we wrap up here today, challenging you to do good, to give forward, and to be the change. And we'll see you next time right back here at Supply Chain Now. Thanks, everybody.